Yeah, so mine is going to be on Marfan syndrome. Before I get started, this is being filmed for my cohort. Everybody in this room, except for Julie maybe, has dealt with this patient, so we just need to refrain from using her name. Okay, so our agenda for today, we're required to talk about the patient profile, her disease state, the factors around her current admission, go through the nutrition care process, and then some conclusions. So our patient is a female. She's 49 years old. She's 197 pounds and she's 6'2". She is in the normal range for her BMI. Social complications, she is homeless. She uses methamphetamine. She did test positive for meth upon arrival. And then she is still here because of discharge planning issues. So her initial reason for admission was acute encephalopathy. She presented with confusion. She didn't know where she was. She was a little bit violent. She did have several code grays called on her during her admission. She did have a tox screen that was with the methamphetamine, and she did have a blood pressure of greater than 160, which becomes more relevant in a moment. Again, this is kind of some of the social issues going on. Her family is somewhat supportive. Her daughter also seems to have some social issues, so that's part of the problem in getting her out of here into an adult family home. There were a lot of code grays called talking about her wandering off, having issues with the confusion. And the biggest issue right now is this length of stay. She's been here 164 days and counting.
Oh my goodness.
This is very interesting because you have all talked about her, dealt with her. We've all written notes at this point, I think. So first of all, what is Marfan syndrome? Marfan syndrome is a genetic disorder that basically mutates the FBN1 gene. And so what this does is cause a bunch of different abnormalities in her cells. So one of the biggest ones is muscle wasting. Their muscles tend to get really weak. They get really unable to build muscle, so they can't really exercise very well. They get dental abnormalities, so they have jaws that are kind of misaligned. They have dental caries. They have crooked teeth. They have long arms and fingers. This woman, you notice she was 6'2". She's very tall, long. Her fingers are extremely long. And then the biggest problem with Marfan syndrome is the bulging aorta. They actually have an aorta that's extremely large and extremely engorged, and it comes out of the side of her neck. In Marfan syndrome, they actually cannot, they're advised not to play sports as children. They're advised not to do any risky behaviors because they can bust their aorta, which is fun.
Not a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. They're also higher risk for glaucoma and cataracts, sudden lung collapse, and emphysema. So in our patient, we're not seeing all of those things, but we do see the muscle wasting. There was obvious visual muscle wasting. I thought it was interesting that at no point during her stay has anybody done a nutrition-focused physical exam. I was able to actually take her to the scale one day. There was a weird weight, and so I wanted to reweigh her, so I actually helped walk her to the scale. So I was able to actually visually assess her, and there is the severe muscle wasting. You can just see it in her. I was even, as she stood on the standing scale, I could see from behind, and you could see all the bones and the back and everything. She also has the dental abnormality. She's currently on a dental soft diet. She's up to, her swallowing valves and stuff lately have been good, but she's on this dental soft diet because she can't chew. And then that also just inhibits what she wants to eat, what feels palatable, what makes her happy, so that kind of inhibits her nutrition. And then hypertension. The hypertension is scary because that is actually something that puts them at greater risk for the aortic dissection. So having the high blood pressure, and you can see that it was extremely high upon admit, it can actually cause it to just burst out of the blue. And 13.1% of the patients that have that they all go to surgery, 30% will die. So it's extremely important to manage that. And then also the altered mental status is a huge part of this. Part of her malnutrition, obviously when you're on meth, your appetite's not great, you're not eating right, you're taking meth instead of having dinner. So they end up having that issue coming in, but then also it screws with their electrolytes, it screws with their hydration status. So their labs go all over the place. She did have ketones present in her urine when she arrived, so clearly she's been starving herself of carbohydrates and other things. So the nutrition care process this is kind of what we went through. The assessment, so she was initially assessed by Lauren, was the first person after Tracy. And she was referred to by Tracy because Tracy saw that she might be at risk for malnutrition. She did have an admit risk screen score of 3+, so the nurses did catch that. We did see a 15-pound weight loss in the first week that she arrived. She wasn't eating anything. She was just refusing, and that's part of that altered mental status. She wasn't swallowing very well. Part of that's the altered mental status, so SLP did have her on a puree diet, which just made it a little bit worse because nobody really wants to eat a puree, especially when you're kind of mentally having issues. It seems off. It's harder to focus on what you're supposed to be doing and why. So she was below 50% of her estimated energy during admission, and then I also have her calorie requirements and her protein when she arrived. So the nutrition diagnosis was severe protein calorie malnutrition related to AMS lethargy as evidenced by weight loss greater than 2%, energy intake was equal or less than 50%, and greater or equal to 5 days. So the initial interventions that Lauren prescribed were if we were unable to advance her diet and she continues to remain full code, we should consider nutrition support, which is kind of the path that this went down. So this was the initial recommendation, was to have the fiber source at 65 mils, encourage PO when she's awake and it's safe to do so, and then order a daily multivitamin. So this is kind of the start of where we start working with her. So on 9/29 is when she was admitted. She was seen by Tracy on October 1st. Lauren got to her on October 7th and made the malnutrition diagnosis and requested the nutrition support. After that, they did initially start with the NG tube, then they quickly moved her to PEG because they knew it was going to be a long-term issue, so they did that. She was eating okay during that time. She was eating a little bit, and so they decided to switch it to nocturnal only to try and get some of those hunger cues up and encourage her a little bit more. But she was only meeting 50% of her nutritional needs. By November, they decided to see if they could move towards discontinuing this, so they did a kcal count, and it showed very little oral intake. Then we hit December, and they thought, let's cease it, see if that encourages some more like hunger cues, gets her to eat a little bit more, get her some fortified meals so what she does eat is higher calorie and higher quality. So we did that. We put her off the kcal count, and for most of early January we were doing kcal counts. Like it would go for 3 days, it would come off, it would go for 3 more days. And basically what those showed is that she was eating, after I averaged them all out, it was about 30% of her nutritional needs. So we resumed the nocturnal tube feeds, got her back up to 50% of her needs, kind of encouraged her some more. And by February 5th, we were able to discontinue the tube feed. And then this is where she kind of starts to turn around. She starts to get better. It seems like that worked. The tube feeding was a great supplement to kind of get her back on her feet. And she does kind of start eating pretty well. So they totally remove the PEG. The eating improves. She gets off it completely, including the NG, because they did have that back for a minute. And then we show, and kcal count is still only showing an average of 30%. But then SLP came in and decided to upgrade her diet from the mechanical soft to the dental soft, which was kind of where it made the biggest difference. She started to enjoy her meals. I think her mental status started to improve a little bit, because at the end of the day, who really wants to eat them much? And so her meals are still soft. They're not as soft, but they still like soak the breads. They still soak her cookies in milk. They still kind of give her like cream of wheats and things. So she's able to chew them properly and not choke, but it's not quite that intense anymore. And then at the present, we are just waiting for her to discharge to an adult family home. There is the social issue with her daughter not being totally there as well, not signing paperwork on time, so she is still hanging out. I just checked actually to make sure it changed the date on how long her length of stay was. So some things that we saw during her stay on her weight trend, you can see that her peak loss occurred before the tube feed initiation, and then it kind of went down again in that time when we were playing with it, and now we're slowly starting to climb back up. And then her vitals also significantly improved. Her blood pressure is kind of back into the normal area. Her NA is back to normal, no more ketones, normal B12, normal albumin, or I'm sorry, low albumin still, but it is gradually getting better. So then there are some concerns for the future. So we are going to hopefully discharge her to an adult family home. And that means that hopefully she'll be well regulated. They'll be able to keep meals. They'll be able to keep that blood pressure low, which is extremely important. But something she is more at risk for are the visual risks. So making sure she has a diet high in carotenoids, making sure her visual health is as healthy as it can be is extremely important, because we want her to, live a long life and hopefully recover from all of this. She is only 49. And so kind of preventing some of these things might be warranted. Her malnutrition status, she is improving, her weight is going back up. But if she's not being watched as closely at the adult family home, there is a chance she could relapse and this could all start going downhill again. And then we'll get her back. And then hypertension, again, with that aortic dissection, it's extremely important that she follows the NASH diet, that she gets a healthy, well-rounded meal, because if that goes up, it could literally kill her within a second. So that's extremely important. And then there are my references, and I'm sorry I talk so fast. Okay, you can edit. Oh wait, questions, never mind.
I have one question.
Yeah.
If you go back to your last slide. So for the visual risks, for if like glaucoma and cataracts are risks of this disease in general, is a diet rich in carotenoids really going to do anything for her?
It probably won't completely stop it, but it can delay it and it can slow the progress. And then also quick pitch here. My thesis is actually on this topic. I'll be defending my thesis on April 21st, and I can give you a CEU if you decide to attend.
So what's your thesis on, the diagnosis or the carotenoids?
The carotenoids.
Okay.
And then I have one more question.
Yes.
So you said that later into her admission, you had noticed no one had ever performed a physical assessment on her.
Mm-hmm.
But then you said that at her first assessment, Lauren diagnosed her with malnutrition?
Yes, Lauren put in the note that because she had the low intake and because she had the documented weight loss, she did not need to perform a physical
So
exam.
it was based on other information.
We don't have any validated criteria for Marfan syndrome as far as like the nutrition-focused physical assessment
Got
goes.
it.
And so it's kind of like doing it on somebody
Is it
who has
because
like
muscle
cerebral
loss?
palsy or something like that, where you're like,
Yeah, that's my question. Is all the muscle wasting you were seeing, is that really related to Marfan itself?
I would say that part of it is Marfan, part of it is the meth. So if you actually go look at her, and I did get a pretty decent look at her, you can see where, like, when she's elongated, like the insides of her legs are really like long and thin, and I think that's more Marfan. But then if you look at like her face and like where she's had like injuries in the past from this, you can see like her temples are totally like collapsed. And if you look at pictures of Marfan people that are like on the healthier end of the spectrum, they don't really have that look to them.
she also doesn't have teeth.
Yeah,
So that'll do
yeah,
it too.
that would
She
do
won't
it
have
too.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why
Yeah.
physical assessment probably
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like,
Yeah,
But
and
not
it-
that,
And it would be, I think from a case study perspective, it would have been interesting to see like how her physical assessment progressed, but I understand like why Lauren didn't think that was like clinically necessary.
And what would be the goal if like her muscle is kind of become a new point? Like what would be the reasonable goal for us? Like, cause the tube feeding would go on and off, and then I understand the calorie count was not always able to see at least 50% of the estimated needs. However, I felt like for her, we have to have a more realistic goal to want to keep the tube feeding going, because whenever I'm not there, the tube feeding go back.
Yeah, so I think the most realistic thing for her is to try and make sure that she can just eat this dental soft diet. She does really well with prompting and cueing. The nurses are at a point now where they know that. They wheel her out, they play Bon Jovi, she eats dinner. And I mean, it's true.
she's a very social lady, and
Yeah,
so we
she
realized
wants to
over
stay
her time
outside.
here that she did much better being with other people. And so now the nurses have her come out to the nurses station and they hang out with her while she eats, and that helps a
She
lot.
uses a computer as well.
Yes, and she has a very strong preference for like, say, fast food, things along those lines, where
Yeah.
they've been allowed to bring her those things now that she's on Dental Soft, and so
Yeah.
they've made some improvements lifestyle wise, I guess. Like,
And
her
what's really interesting
social-
about this is we've kind of turned into a long-term care facility for her. So the nurses really do get to know her a little bit better than I'd say most of their other patients, and so they really they know her preferences. She is technically not non-select, but the nurses do the ordering for her. But they kind of know, like, if she's having a bad mental day, they know what she'll actually eat versus what she won't. And so that's really like helpful.
Then how does she get those salads? I
The
guess-
nurses will order it for her.
But she.
No, she's on a dental saw.
Yeah,
She gets
they
salad.
soak.
I
They
don't
soak them in.
understand.
They soak the salad.
They soak it in like ranch. They make it really like, and they let it sit for a while. Yeah, it's kind of gross. Like,
Then Lori will come and say, well, why did she get salad? And I said, I have no idea.
Yeah. And the reason why they do that is because it's something that she really loves and she'll really eat consistently. So they just try to make it as soft as possible.
I don't
And-
know which part went wrong. I'm like,
A salad dressing, lettuce slurry.
Yes.
Soggy lettuce.
I feel like we just need to be more realistic about the overall goal for her. Like, I think she deserved to try to stay there on her own for a little bit longer to just show whether or not she can do it by herself. She has trouble to discharge, and then she tends to get more agitated at night when they're trying to do the nighttime feeds as well. So they have to get psychiatry to manage her.
Well, nighttime feeds, you mean what? Like, because she's
She was
not on a
getting
tube feeding. Oh, you mean when she was on the
Yeah,
nocturnal?
yeah, that particularly worse her mental status, so she cold gray, she got more agitated at night.
Was that a PEG or was that a KO?
The peg.
She had both of those.
Yeah.
At one point, she was pulling on the peg, trying to get it out, just very agitated by it, which is why I think the adult family home is hopefully a good transition for her. It's a little less
Yeah,
care,
it's
a
probably
little
gonna be
more
hard
social.
to find one that will take her.
She actually has an accepting one as
Oh,
of
she does?
today,
Okay.
but her daughter is technically her signer, and her daughter also has some of these issues. And
Yeah, because she seems like she might be a little more difficult than some of the patients that we take.
Yeah.
So,
And from what I
Yeah.
understand in all the case order notes, this might be an adult family home that specializes in these types of people that have a history of narcotic abuse and all of that.
yeah, because
And they've held the bed for her for weeks now, but it's getting her daughter to sign it or trying to get her a new power of attorney that's a little more on top of things. The daughter kind of comes and goes. The daughter will be super active for like 2-3 weeks and then disappear off the face
is
of
the
the earth.
daughter homeless?
I cannot tell from the notes if the daughter is homeless. However, they kind of indicate that she might also have the meth problem, and so that kind of tells me even if she's not homeless, she's in and out of places and not exactly in safe environments, especially to be taking care of her mother. So
So do you think she has any needs, as she's nearing discharge? So,
I think we've got her to a point, like the best point we can absolutely get her to in order to discharge. I just think maybe some of these things should be considered in the discharge note to the adult family home so they keep them in mind to make sure she's as healthy as she can be. Because like I said, it's probably not going to stop some of these things, but it could at least delay them.
Yeah, you did a good job. Considering how long she's been here, it was good to be able to see that timeline because she's been here a long time. So that's a lot of information to try to organize because she's been here since before you started, right?
She has, yeah.
Yeah.
She's been here since September 29th.
I think she might have been here when Anna was pregnant, and then I think she's still
Still
here
here.
now. We're like,
Like,
5 months old, 5 months
almost
old.
7. I wonder
Almost
what the
7 months old.
reimbursement is for somebody like her because like how much, I mean, I'm sure she's all here for free now. Interesting case though, yeah.
Thank you guys.
Both interesting cases.